Good evening from New York. I am Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS. The lovely lady next to me is Dr. Sandile Hlatshwayo. Sandile, have I finally gotten it?
Sorry,
Have I
say it again.
finally gotten the pronunciation of your name?
That's fine.
All right. Well, welcome back to CWS.
Thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. At age 17, she started college at Spelman College, worked at P&G South Africa as an assistant brand manager with responsibility for Pampers brand for all of sub-Saharan Africa, lived and worked for 2 years in South Africa. Came back to the US at age 23 to pursue master's degree at Stanford University. At age 25, graduated from Stanford and went to work with Dean of Stern Business School, NYU, and also worked with Dr. Michael Spence, Nobel Prize economist, co-authored papers on economic development, which received lots of kudos, including requests from Obama economics team, earned a doctorate in economics at Berkeley this year. You've been busy. You've been busy, Sandile.
Yeah, I've
Can,
been a little busy.
can you hear me properly?
Yeah, it's a little bit muffled, just a bit, but I can
Muffled. All right,
hear.
let's fix that. Is this better?
Yes, I'll just get.
Awesome. So, what has earning your PhD taught you about yourself that most people do not yet know?
Uh, so I think people, when they look at my CV, you kind of go through it as you've gone through it. There's like this assumption that there's something innately very intelligent and smart about me that goes beyond the average person, and I would say that's probably not the case. I'm just very stubborn when I set my mind to something, and I think that more than anything, that's what my CV kind of points to is just grit. I just continue to show up for what my dreams are, what my goals are, day after day, year after year. And in terms of, in particular, the PhD process, so kind of going back to this thing of not being above average, if you will, in some way, is that I think for me, the PhD process, it really brought me to the edge of, and that's exactly what it's intended to do in terms of what I consider to be like what I could handle.
Mhm.
And and it was a fraught, difficult process. And so while it ended beautifully, and I got everything that I wanted out of it, including one of my dream jobs, uh, it was incredibly difficult. And that was like it was a good learning process in that way of like again, how do I aggressively continue to show up for myself every day, even in the worst moments, even in the very difficult moments. And certainly the PhD was one of the most difficult times intellectually of my life. Yeah.
Both of your parents, PhDs. Your brother
Yeah.
is a good friend of mine,
Hmm.
PhD in chemical engineering.
Correct.
Your late father, PhD in economics. Which
Education.
education?
Hmm.
Which of them you would say had an impact in what direction your academic career took, your
Hmm.
academic path took?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you slipped up and said economics for my father, because he very much was an economist. From a very early age, he would host these intellectual salons where South Africans from all over the country would come to our home and spend a weekend, and there'd be late into the evening conversations about the future, and in particular about South Africa's future with respect to its economic structure and development and how it was going to be inclusive. And it was, he was incredibly kind in that he allowed me to take part in those conversations and took my opinion very seriously and pushed back where I wasn't making a clear point or a good argument. And this is all at age, 8. So I was very blessed in that way. And so I would say, in terms of my early curiosity and early, if you will, academic self, my comfort around academics, that certainly comes from my father. But I would say that my mother taught me rigor,
Mhm.
and she also, I think, even more than myself, is someone that perseveres, someone that is even more stubborn than me in terms of seeing her goals accomplished. And so, over time, both with her rigor as well as showing up for herself and what her goals are and her dreams are, year after year after year, absolutely got me to the point where I am now. So both of them really.
Your dad's from South Africa, so you have the South African family. Your mom from Guyana. Um, you mentioned your mom, and I know she's a very strong and capable woman.
Mhm.
But who are some women that, other than your mom, that have impacted you or helped to shape this woman, this young woman we have come to know as Sandile?
Yeah, so when I was, that's a really good question. And so when I was very, very young, my grandmother moved in with us, and I was, I was baby effectively, and so she moved into the same room as me, and so because of that, and I think that we only got separate rooms when I was probably around age 10 or 11 or so, but for that entire time, she was a person that I would wake up next to, and she would wake up and do morning devotional each morning, and at night before we went to bed, she would say her prayers and sing her hymns. And I would say that she's incredibly impactful in my life. And even where I'm not necessarily as religious as she was, I'm deeply spiritual because of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that my meditative practices, where I do have kind of spiritual practices, and they're pretty much habit based, come very much from her in that tradition. And I also always feel very taken care of and loved and prayed for, which was always a comfort.
Mm-hmm.
I think growing up, especially because I was always trying to push the envelope in my intellectual pursuits. Her influence on me has kind of always been a stabilizing, constant, daily force of stability. Yeah.
Give us a glimpse of Sandile at age 9 and then at age 15.
Sorry, say it again.
Give us a glimpse of Sandile growing up at age 9 and then at age 15.
What was I like at the time?
Yes.
uh, so in my tween years, I guess my preteen years, I was um, I was rebellious. I wanted to, I think, be very American. So growing up in an immigrant household with father South African, mother Guyanese, um, certainly lots of like global influences. I wanted though to not have that at the time, and so my version of rebelliousness was wanting to wear nail polish like the girls next door, wanting to go to the concerts in downtown Cincinnati like the kids that were one age, one grade above me. It was, yeah, it was very much, I think, trying to assimilate into like what I saw as the very cool cheerleader archetype, if you will.
So,
And then at 15, 16, I think I was more finding myself and understanding that it was a gift to be different in some ways. And so as I got older, I got more into debate. Um, I got more into leadership positions in terms of being class president at school. I was doing a lot of volunteer work. So it was just a very, very formative time of saying, okay, if I'm not going to be the standard American cookie cutter girl that I'm seeing on TV, then who am I going to be? And really getting comfortable with that.
do you remember the first time you visited South Africa and how old you were?
So it was after apartheid had ended. And I want to say that I was around probably, I'm guessing age 10 or so, right in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it being uh, a really lovely experience in the sense that we had always been this small, immediate family, uh, because we were exiled. And so while we had this huge network of friends and colleagues from all over South Africa in the U.S., I didn't have a broader sense of how large my family was.
Mm.
And so going to South Africa, and it's day after day after day, meeting cousins, meeting great aunties, meeting, kind of distant relatives, second cousins, uncles, everybody. It was this real sense of, oh, I come from this huge network of really, really incredible people, and importantly, kind of seeing how we're similar in different ways, especially the women on my father's side of the family. We're all these very like strong forces of nature, and it's so fascinating that especially for the ones that didn't grow up around each other, that we all have this common trait as Hlatshwayo women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What was a defining moment for you in South Africa?
A defining moment.
Uh-huh.
So I would say that like the biggest defining moment for me was actually when I moved there after college.
Yes.
And so I had grown up with this sense of, again, like you said, a very, very strong sense of I'm a South African, I'm a South African, I'm a South African, and then my mother's Guyanese, right?
Right.
And so this was always my storyline, especially leading up into college. It was very much a part of my core identity. And then I moved there and I was like, I'm here, I'm South African, it's so exciting. And they were like, oh no, you're very much American. And it showed up in particular ways. So it wasn't just that I had this, very, very American accent, and that when I speak Zulu, my nose, it sounds so nasally that the little kids actually, if I do speak Zulu, will like close their noses to mimic me. Because I have a very, very American accent. It was also that I was given privilege and access to different spaces that other South Africans, equally as well versed, as eloquent as whatever have you, were not given. And I saw that very much in the corporate area, where just because of where I was born and how I sounded, I was given special access. And so that was a defining moment of recognizing that, being willing to step back and say, okay, I'm very much still identify with my South African identity. However, I am American in this space, and this is how it shows up. And also, this is how I need to leverage that access to make sure that my peers are getting the correct attention that they deserve. And sometimes throwing back the Americanness in people's faces of like, this is not something that you should desire, right? I was born in another country, and it might seem very exotic to you, but there are real problems there. And there are some things in South Africa that are actually done better.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did you meet was your paternal grandmother alive? Was your father's mother alive when you got there?
Yes, yeah. So she had come. I met her a few times in my life, but she had come to the U.S. when I was very little. I want to say probably like 6 or 7, and stayed with us in Michigan for almost a whole summer. And so, yeah, I did have some interaction with her. She was a very serious woman.
Yeah. Do you remember?
Like I said, Hlatshwayo women are forces of nature.
Do you remember any words of wisdom from her?
Oh, I was very young.
Oh.
Used to, so mostly I was just the little girl that was trailing behind her, trying to keep up, and that she was like, sit down, behave yourself, be quiet, listen to me. This is how things are done. This is how things are not done. But I do remember, in addition to just her kind of her presence being very serious, that she was generous of spirit.
Yes.
So we would go on these long walks, and this is Midland, Michigan, in the middle of summer, very, very warm in the suburbs, and we would collect tall grasses, and then she would bring these tall grasses back and weave these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mats, and then she would give them out to the neighbors, and
Wow.
it was like such this incredible like gift, and then everybody was so delighted by it. But I do remember that being part of her visit too. Yeah.
You visited Guyana with your mother this July.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, by the way.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thanks for having us. It was such a good excuse to come.
It was her first time, I think, in 33, 35 years.
37 years.
37 years.
I know.
Right? And it was your first time.
Yeah.
So tell us about that experience, and what were some of the highlights and surprises for you?
Yeah, so we had been trying, me and my brothers. I have a little brother, Duduzi, who's 10 years younger, and my older brother, Mfundo, who's 6 years older. We had been trying for a number of years, kind of sparking the conversation of like, let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's go back. We all like to travel a lot, and we were like, Mommy, like, why don't we go to Guyana? And I think that because she had left when she was very young, when she was 18 years old, and got here to the U.S. and had to just make it happen. And for so long at every different stage, right? So coming in as a 17 or an 18-year-old to the middle of Ohio, the middle of Appalachia, and going through your first winter, going through holidays for the first time on your own, like Thanksgiving, and then going to the master's, going to the PhD. She had kind of just been always so forwardly focused. and had done, I think, a little bit less of looking back or wanting to sit in the past because she needs to be so forward focused, especially for us, her children. There was a hesitancy there.
Mm-hmm.
And so your kind of week long of events, in addition to wanting to see family at the time, it all came together in this perfect way. And so it was a delight to come back. I think it had a lot of my favorite elements. So there was a social justice aspect in terms of getting to go and visit the schools and also talk to young women in the community. There was, of course, the network built and the community building with other people in the Guyanese diaspora. It certainly helped with my identity as a Guyanese person,
Mm-hmm.
and making that a stronger element of my identity. And then, of course, there was the fun, the galas and the cultural events, and it was fabulous. And I know, importantly for her, it was a wonderful welcome back home.
Yeah.
And your events were a huge part of that, in addition to seeing the family and getting to hang out. It was great.
She's a big supporter of mine, right? So anything I said I'm going to do, and your mom is there.
Yeah, yeah,
my book launch 5 years ago, she was there.
yeah,
Dragging
yeah.
you along. So I'm
Yeah, she does.
I'm very appreciative of her.
Well, I think she had a sense. I mean, of you're also a force of nature in so many ways, and I think that she wanted us to be in each other's orbit.
I'm honored. I must ask you this question. I asked you of South Africa. What was the biggest defining moment for you in Guyana?
Yeah, so we did this trip. I think it was a Thursday. That was the day that it was a little bit quieter. We did this trip with mommy's brothers and a cousin, down the river to Bartica, and I got to see where she took her entrance exams and where she was specifically studying. And I was just, this little apartment above a rum bar. That's what they're called, right? Rum
Right.
bars.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. This little apartment above a rum bar.
Rum shop. Sorry.
Rum shops.
Yeah.
Thank you. Above a rum shop. And got like a broader sense of and I got to see her grandfather's home and an aunt's home that was up the road, and just got a better sense again for the full narrative
Mm-hmm.
of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what the version was from when I was born onward, and what that looked like. But getting this earlier piece and seeing her even interact with her cousins, interact with her brothers, and what they remember of her, of being this very, very nerdy, dorky woman, well, young girl at the time and now woman. It was, yeah, I think that for me it was almost like closing a circle of like, like this is the full arc, the full narrative arc.
You have probably described your mom many times. Now that you have experienced Guyana for the first time, you've gotten to see her in a natural habitat from when she came. If there is one sentence or perhaps two that you would add to your description of your mother, what would that be?
Above and beyond what my previous characterizations of her would be.
Yes.
Very focused and incredibly trusting that if she worked hard, that the world would be there to take her hand forward. And so I guess it's a question of faith.
Yes.
That again, like she was so intensely focused on school and performing well, and moving forward, but part of I think the effort that is necessary to go into that is you have to trust that there's going to be something there for you to step up to.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily an obvious thing for most people. And I think for many people, there's a sense of like, even if I work very hard, even if I push myself to the brink, who knows if it's going to work out? I'll be right back here in the same place. And there was a sense always, and you certainly see it now that I've had this Guyanese piece of her story, that she just had this belief that if she kept her head down and continued to do her version of the work, that the universe, if you will, would do its version
Mm-hmm.
in terms of showing up.
Thank you. For that.
Yeah, which is incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't think it's obvious, especially given where she grew up. Yeah.
What kind of man would you say was your father, and how has he helped to shape the woman you have become?
Mm. So I think some of my most vivid memories of my father are him around other people.
Oh.
He was larger than life. He had incredible presence. He took over, not just rooms, whole houses. His presence. If you were in another room, I don't know, 3 rooms down, you would hear his voice and his laughter. He had an epic laugh, a huge laugh. And people gravitated towards him. I mean, I remember, so he was a professor and taught throughout my life. And I remember his students would drive an hour from their campus to come hang out with him on weekends to talk about their latest assignment or to talk about whatever's happening in South Africa or whatever. People were just incredibly, incredibly, incredibly drawn to him and loyal to him. And I always thought that it was a beautiful personality trait to be so easily loved by people and also to love people so easily. And certainly I think that has informed the way that I approach the world, the way that I approach new people. I always know that every new person has something to teach me.
Yes.
Something to share with me. And I hope that through our interactions, I can shed some light on something that they're going through. Or that my life story can kind of, illuminate something. So it's always this constant wanting to deeply, deeply, deeply connect with the human being in front of me. And I think that I absolutely get that from him.
Your academic path, Spelman, Stanford, Berkeley, each demanding in its own right. You stuck it out. As you said, you're stubborn. Your mom is a driving force in that. But during this process, when you might have come to a roadblock, or times when you perhaps felt, I'm just presuming here, felt like not continuing, but you did.
Yeah.
Which of your parents, which of their personalities you believe showed up those times when you needed something, some voice, something to push you along?
Yeah, absolutely, mommy.
Your mom.
Yeah. I've never ever heard her say this is just not something I can do. She doesn't say no to herself, and she certainly doesn't say no to us, for better or worse. She's so forward looking, and also again this trust, this faith that the next step is there. And even if you can't see it in the moment, that, again, the universe is conspiring to catch you. And I remember, so there was a period, and it's funny, so this kind of brings up both of them in this story, but it was during my first year of the PhD process. And there were days when first year is very, very incredibly taxing. There's too much work to do. It's actually impossible for you to finish all the work. So you can imagine being that stressed out for that long and having to make priorities of okay, I'm just not going to finish that assignment, or I have to study for this test, but I'm only going to give it 2 hours of how stressful that can be when you're used to being a straight A student. And I remember being on the phone with her one time. I was outside the library. It had been an all-night session. I was exhausted. I needed to go into another session and keep working. And I was like, I can't do this. We're done. It's done. It's not for me. And I remember her saying, Sandile, let's go through your previous stages, right? Let's go through high school. and all the work you did in high school, and then going to college and all of your academic pursuits as well as your extracurriculars. Let's go to Stanford, and then going to New York and publishing, with a Nobel Prize winner. That's so amazing. Da, da, da. She was like, let's go through all these stages at periods where you were like, I'm at my edge. And then you worked, right? And then you took a step forward. She was like, so what is unique? What is different about this particular period? There's nothing that's different about this particular moment. Take the next step. Just continue to show up. And yeah, and again, so in that conversation though, she brought up the fact that I have such good backing, if you will, from both my grandmother as well as my father, who both have passed on. That were both such huge advocates for me, and I've always felt their presence. I don't know what you want to call it. I guess Christians would call them kind of like angels, but like I've always felt their presence,
Yeah.
spirits, encouraging and pushing me along. And she's like, "Don't forget that you have this support network, this broader support network."
Sandile, before I take a break, I'm just going to read a few comments. Mom Sandy, dearest Sandile, such a joy to listen to you and be with you in this space. I am deeply proud of you. And JJ said, you have achieved such academically. What was your driving force to succeed in such a competitive PhD economics program at Berkeley?
Thank you, Mommy. Hi, Mommy. On the driving force question, so I think I'm a huge believer in this sense that we're all here for some reason, and that there's a task or a set of tasks that each individual human is here on Earth to fulfill, execute, and I think that my particular skill set lends itself well to the career path that I've chosen, to economics, in particular to this macroeconomic policy space, wherein I'm going in and talking to the authorities in different governments and discussing what reforms they're doing, how they can improve, where they think that we as economists can improve in terms of our support. There's a lot of different characteristics of what my, I guess, like kind of key skill sets are that come together. And so in terms of knowing that this was probably my potential maximum contribution to society, I felt, given what not just my parents' generation, but grandparents' generation, and going back through my ancestry, the things that had been sacrificed to get me to this space where I actually have the opportunities, the access to be brought into the inner circle, if you will, that it would be, it would be a great tragedy for me not to realize that.
Is that big for you, making a contribution to society?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge driving force for me. It's yeah.
I'm going to cheat. I said I'm going to take a quick break, but I'm going to cheat. I said I was going to take a quick break, but this question just popped in my head, and that is world problems, world challenges, big problems in the world.
Yeah.
If you had to attach yourself to one, to solving one, which one will you attach yourself to? You want to wait until the break? Until after the break to answer that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Let's take a break.
Okay, great.